everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I am Katie, joined by Chris and John. How's it going,
Hello.
fellas?
Yeah.
We even got the on location high five.
I know, we made it work.
This week we are continuing our summer makeover series where we are taking things that we already have that we just haven't gotten to, and this is true of a lot of companies. We put ourselves last, and we're using generative AI to overhaul some stuff that's been on our list. This week we're talking about case studies. So this came up last week when John and I were using generative AI to overhaul the Trust Insight Services page. And if you missed that, you can go to trustinsights.ai/YouTube, where we basically created a scoring rubric to align the current services pages with our ICP and figure out how we needed to improve them. And one of those things that came up over and over again was a lack of a clear case study where we could demonstrate, here's the work that we've done. And the conversation, we realized, needed to be its own thing, because especially when you work at a consultancy and you do you're in the service industry, it's harder, at least in my opinion, to demonstrate results, because it's not, we increased sales by 30% or we did this thing. And that's where I want to start the conversation. But I also want to, take an opportunity to look at our existing case studies and see if we can use generative AI not to only revamp them, but come up with a more efficient process. Because, as we've stated, we put ourselves last, and therefore doing things like putting together a case study, which should be part of our process of offboarding a client, or like once a quarter when we review contracts and see what we've done, we should just spin up a new case study, put it on the website. Because John, one of the things that you mentioned in our live stream last week was eventually the case studies become the services pages. Like you point people there versus pointing them to the services, because you want to demonstrate your capabilities. So all of that today we're talking about using generative AI to revamp case studies. So John, did you want to say any more on that?
That's definitely right where we want to be. The idea is you get to that level where it's not just a list of services, but people can actually say, hey, I have these problems, X, Y, Z, and the map is there for people to see that we know how to do it. But yeah, it's a ton of work to get there. It's not a simple process at all. It takes time, and even just as silly as getting customers who are willing to talk. Like, we face this all the time. We have customers where we're doing some really cool stuff. They don't want to tell anybody what they're doing. The last thing they want is word to get out. So there's a ton of things to juggle, but I'm interested in, having a clear process for it is always a great thing.
So the way we started to structure our case studies that we have on our site to keep it simple was, unsurprisingly, using the 5P framework. So that's typically where we start. What is the purpose? What was the problem we were solving? Who are the people? Who was the client? Who was the stakeholder? Even if we have to anonymize it, what was the process we took? What were the platforms we used? And what was the performance? What was the outcome? It's a very simplistic framework in terms of how to structure a case study, but it still feels heavy because you have to think about what were all the things we did. So, Chris, this is where I turn to you, because you always have some really interesting ideas on how to use generative AI to make things more efficient or cleaner. So where would you like to start today?
I will start. You already covered the 5Ps, so that's all squared away. One of the places that I typically start with an inquiry like this is our deep research prompt framework, because generally speaking, none of us are walking around with encyclopedias in our heads. We don't know everything that's been happening in the marketplace, in the market space. We don't know what new research has come out, what has changed with buyers. And the other place that I would start, and you have to go back probably about 2 months now in the Trust Insights live stream archives, is the sales playbook. So to what John was saying, if we scroll down in the sales playbook here to the different services, basically what's for sale, the ideal end state, except for things like Google Analytics 3, which doesn't exist anymore, but the ideal end state is there's some kind of case study for each of the things that are for sale. And if there's not, then the question becomes, should it be for sale, or do we have a case study that we've just forgotten about for that particular thing? So If we look at something along the lines of like custom model development, have we built an actual model, like not a GPT, not an agent, not a workflow, but an actual model for a customer? The answer is no, we have not. Have we done it for ourselves? The answer is yes, we have. And so a case study there might be more focused when we look at the 5 Ps about the purpose and the process, but we might not have the people, or we might have a performance in the sense of this is the outcome we got, but we can't say this is what the customer did with it. And to your point, Katie, very early on, in a lot of ways, if you think about, we're kind of like, a physician. I can tell you to eat less and exercise more all I want, but if you don't actually do the thing, then I don't have an outcome I can point to that says, like, my advice helped you become healthier.
Well, and I think that's, so that's what John and I were talking about last week. That's one of the challenges with case studies is you don't always have that concrete outcome. And I feel like, depending on the direction you're taking your company, if you're looking to try new things or break into new arenas, you may have only done stuff for yourself. I think that still should have a case study because you still did the thing. You just sort of disclose up front, like, we did this for ourselves, but this is what we did. This is how we did it. I don't think that makes it an invalid case study because you still had to do the work. And I think that that's where I know, I was trained more traditionally on a lot of these things. And that's where I kind of struggle to break out of the, but this is how it's done because I was a little bit more formally trained on these things. And so I'm interested to see how we can creatively look at the work that we've done for ourselves, turn those into case studies because we did the thing, we're using it, we are our own client. And I think we need to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. So the first place I went, unsurprisingly, was Google's Gemini. And I gave it a long prompt of how do we get good case studies. And the deep research, I fed it our sales playbook, which contains 5 different ICPs, which contains what's for sale, which contains all of our marketing. And Gemini came up with a 28-page report based on some academic research it did, because I told it, I want you looking at things like behavioral psychology. I want you looking at things like graphic design. I want you to look at peer-reviewed research and come up with a guide for how do I get a case study. And I gave it the 5 Ps, where the purpose of the case study is to get someone to say, I have that problem, I should hire Trust Insights. And so this 28-page guide now gives me the basic foundation, which we are, in many ways, like you said, we already know. The best practice in B2B marketing is called before after bridge, like, before and after. Our colleague and friend Ginny Dietrich calls it heaven and hell. We call it purpose and performance, whatever you want to call it. That's the basis of it. But now we have all of the guides for design, how to appeal to the ICP. One of the things that came out of here was you might have case studies per different ICP, because a case study that appeals to a CMO is going to be different than a case study who appeals to a mid-level manager, or a case study that appeals to a Fortune 500 is going to be different than the case study that appeals to mid-market.
Makes sense. I mean, and I think that that's where we need to rethink the rules for ourselves in terms of approaching a case study, especially if we're not doing work that has that very tangible outcome of, we've done that work before, we fixed up your SEO and we saw traffic increase from this to this. Like, that's a very tangible case study, but we don't do solely and exclusively that kind of work for our clients. We do a lot of consulting work, and consulting, to your point, is much like, a doctor can give you the advice of what you should do, but you still have to do it. And so the doctor can't claim that they had, like, that they were the ones who got the result. Like, you, the human, still have to do the work.
Right. So in those cases, there's 2 different ways to approach it. One is doing what we're doing right now, which is, instead of a case study, you have something like a walkthrough or a live stream that demonstrates that you have the knowledge and the skills to do the thing. And other people can watch and go, yeah, she knows what she's doing. Or in other cases, you synthesize the case study based on results you've actually gotten but in a more compact format. So let's go into this list here. One of the ones that we've done a lot with in the past is email list hygiene and deliverability consulting. And there's actually a very specific use case for a client that we did. We just never wrote it down. And so we should probably try and transform that into a case study, because I know exactly which client this is. I know what the details are. I know what the results were that we got. And now we just have to do it. So the first place that I would recommend starting with this is to pull open your phone, go into your voice memos app on your phone. And if you know the company or you know the situation, just start talking about it and say, here's what was going on. So anything you want to add before I start foaming at the mouth?
No, I'm interested to see where this is going to go.
Today, we're going to do a case study on email list hygiene and deliverability consulting. We did this for one of our big B2C clients. We got a huge data export out of their Salesforce Marketing Cloud email marketing system. It was a database of 6 million emails that they had no idea whether or not they were good, but they did know that their deliverability was in the toilet. So what we did was we first validated their infrastructure. So we checked out their domain name, their DNS. We checked out everything at the MX toolbox. We ran through Google Postmaster tools, and we figured out that the reason that they were having issues was that like a third of their list was basically garbage. And so using some deliverability tools, both built in that we made for ourselves, plus commercial services, we took the whole 6 million person list, ran through it, pulled out as much junk as we could based on error messages, based on clearly nonsensical email addresses like asdf@asdf.com, and an email validation service. The one we were using at the time was called Million Verifier, and we cleaned up their list. Their list shrank from 6 million to 4 million. So we found 2 million bad email addresses, just garbage that they were sending to. And then when we gave it back to them and they re-implemented, they suddenly found that their complaint rates dropped like a rock, like almost to zero. Their the bounces that they were seeing in their reporting console dropped to almost zero because they were no longer sending to nonsensical addresses that didn't exist. And the net result was their marketing campaigns were much more successful. We don't have an exact number because we couldn't see that in their system, but we know from their feedback that the project was a massive success because they were no longer sending to garbage. So when we approach this as a consulting firm, this is how we tackle it. Now, I'll turn off my voice memo. That's the dime store version of it. In any system you use, there's probably a way to get the transcript out of the voice memo you just made, right? So I'm going to go into my transcripts and let's see, where did it go? What's today? Oh, oops, I just transcribed the wrong one. I do 116. Yes, there we go. Let's do that again. For anyone curious, this is using a app called Parakeet MLX. There we go. So there's my transcript of what I just foamed at the mouth at for almost 2 minutes. Now we're going to go into, let's pick, the generative AI tool of your choice. It does not matter which one. Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, the works, they all work about the same for this purpose. I'm going to attach my sales playbook, and I'm going to attach my custom research. I'm going to say, from the attached transcript, following the best practices guide and thinking through the appropriate ICP from our sales playbook, let's construct a case study narrative in the canvas from the transcript.
Before you hit go on that, wouldn't you, or is it jumping ahead, wouldn't you use our case study template as well?
It is jumping ahead. We want to get the story down first, because there's a very good chance that it's going to create something that we need to proof to make sure it's not lying, because at least for us, that's kind of a core value. It
is. We had an extensive conversation about that earlier.
Exactly. I specified in the canvas because in ChatGPT, in Claude, and in Gemini, the canvas is editable, and you can make modifications to the output right in the canvas if you want. And with something like this, we always want to use the smartest model possible, reasoning model. So Gemini 2.5 Pro, ChatGPT o3, Claude Opus 4 if you have it, Sonnet 4 if you don't. So what we've got here is a large amount of narrative, right? That's a beefy amount of narrative. It looks good, right, in terms of the language it's using, before and after. Now we should go to our case studies page on our website and get an actual case study template that we can use. So I'm going to use the Google Analytics one here.
So I put a couple of links into Slack for you, if that's easier. But yeah, it's the same template.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to download this as the PDF and go back to Gemini and say, this is great. However, it doesn't fit our current template. Question. I'm going to attach our current template. Based on the best practices guide, how effectively does the template design and style meet best practices? Disregard the content. We're focused on design and layout. And I'm going to load the PDF, which is here from our website. And we're going to get some feedback. I'm going to turn off deep research because I don't know why that's on. Oh, I'm in the wrong chat. Duh.
Could you create a scoring rubric for how good your case studies are against?
We sure can.
Okay. I'm not saying we have to today, but I'm just sort of wondering in terms of like how to make these things scalable for larger teams. You know, how does someone get more real-time feedback without having to like make like the director of the team the bottleneck?
So there's a couple different ways we could do that, and let's tackle that in just a bit. Let me retype this prompt that I was just working on here. How effective does the design meet current best practice standards? Disregard the content and focus on the structure and design. Now, while it's thinking, you absolutely can build automated workflows that can do that. So you could take an existing, say, narrative or voice memo or a conference call recording from a client, you know, if you have an offboarding call, and wire it through a set of prompts like we're doing right now, but automated, that would then spit out the individual pieces. The overall assessment of our current template, it serves as a basic project summary that falls short of the modern high conversion best practices outlined in the guide. It reads more like an internal report than a persuasive marketing asset. Point by point comparison. Narrative framework. The template uses the 5 Ps. This is very different from the before and after bridge. While problem performance loosely matched before and after, the structure is more of a technical report and lacks the clear, compelling story of transformation. Trophy case is missing. This the guide identifies this as a critical executive element for executive skimmers. What is the most impressive result? Powerful testimonial missing. This is a major weakness. Client snapshot incomplete. Call to action missing. Visual hierarchy. The headline is there, but it needs more pizzazz. Visual flow, the hierarchy is flat and lacks a clear visual path section. Typography is okay, but has a poor hierarchy and has a bland use of white space. Data visualization, it successfully shows it, but it's a basic visualization. So based on the general best practices, it's not, the Gemini version of this is not fond of it.
I don't know, John. I'm having a rough couple of weeks. So last week, all of the services pages that I created scored super low. And now this week, the case study template that I created is just not good. So I'm about like one more live stream away from resigning from my position.
Well, you got to keep in mind that these large language models are trained on the whole web.
Yeah.
And, there's companies that have a team of 20 that are going to work on this page. You're getting judged against that. So,
No, I know. But I think one of the things that, I like about this process that we're doing, the summer makeover series, is because we are a small company and because we tend to wear many hats. I tend to wear the CMO hat, but I'm not a CMO. It just needs to get done. And so it's helpful for me as someone who is not a CMO, is more on the CEO, COO side of things, to understand, like, where is this falling short? How can we do better? Because if my job primarily is growth, then I'm not doing it. So what can I do to, get better growth? So I actually see it as a real opportunity for learning, provided I'm open to it, which I am. So how can we do better? And so, Chris, one of the questions that I was asking you is that, we can get into, it's not so much the process for creating it, it's the process for reviewing the case study. So a lot of times in a team, the person who heads up the team or the CMO is responsible for like that final sign off. And that's where a lot of bottlenecks can happen. And so that's why I'm wondering, like, could you put together a scoring rubric to help whoever's putting together the case study get it to a certain point? Like, don't put it in front of the final signatory until it's like a 95 out of 100. Otherwise, you're wasting their time. So, like, use the machine to keep refining it until you get to that high score and then ask for sign off.
And magically, Gemini has created a case study evaluation rubric, which we are now going to put in Google Docs just to make sure. Pro tip, by the way, folks, if you're using Canvas in Gemini, the export button has an export to Docs. Always, always, always export to Google Docs so that you have a backup copy of the results. You will thank me later. So this is the best practices rubric, again, based on the deep research. So one thing we didn't do, because there's not enough time in a live stream to do this, we didn't read through the 28 pages in the best practices document to validate that that is in fact reality. Now, I did have a chance to look before the show, and I might have some stylistic quibbles, but for the most part, it is accurate in that, this is what works in 2025 for case studies. However, I would recommend that if you're going to do this in production, please do spend more than 15 minutes reading the output, because 28 pages is a lot. So we've got the scoring rubric, and now we can say, great, using the scoring rubric, score the existing AAA case study PDF I loaded. So we can do exactly what you said, Katie, which is to run a score analysis on it and see how it comes out.
I feel like these are really handy. I wouldn't even call them shortcuts. They're just really good tools in your overall arsenal, especially when you have a larger team and everybody's sort of fighting for that attention of like, I need feedback on this and I need feedback on this. Putting together these rubrics are a really good way to cut down on that bottleneck of one person or two people being responsible for reviewing. That by the time it hits your desk, it's already in really good shape. And so the back and forth should be, minimal.
So this case study scores a 47 out of 100. The big gaps: client is the hero and addresses emotional anchors. Those two things are fall short in that category. In the persuasion components: benefit-driven headline, trophy case of key results, powerful client testimonial, persona-driven call to action. So we didn't specify a persona in the original case study, which is something that the rubric does want us to also be focused on. And addressing cognitive biases. So thinking about the cognitive biases for the reason why people read case studies in the first place. And so it says it's got a strong foundation, but it needs more.
So does this tell us, like, is the next step like, okay, what do we do?
Yes. So the next step would be to say, great, based on the scoring rubric, do a new draft of the AA case study in the Canvas using HTML, CSS, D3.js, .js or equivalent from CDN.js, Tailwind, that keeps the what is a page 4x3 or 16:9? Actually, this is 16:9. The 16:9 aspect ratio, but transforms the case study to align with the best practices guide and the Trust Insights sales playbook.
What's
Rendered
interesting
in-
is you're having it redo the entire thing, whereas I would have thought to just redo the content and then repaste it back into the template.
I forgot brand standards.
Mm.
You must use the following brand standards. Now we hit update.
And if you haven't already created like a knowledge block for your brand standards, do it. It's going to be a pain in the butt to keep looking it up every single time. And where did I put that PDF? Like wherever you keep your generative AI information, your knowledge blocks, your prompts, whatever it is, create a knowledge block of your brand standards. Even if it is, as Chris sort of pasted in, like your fonts and your colors.
Exactly. So we're going to see what this comes up with, because these tools cannot natively create slides, which is functionally what our case studies are. They're single page slides. Yep. They just do that poorly, and they're getting better, but they're still not great at it. But they can create web pages, and so we've just given it. We basically said make it into a web page that is 16:9. Now let's see as this thing renders. So it made the chart separate from. I don't know that it needs to be quite that literal in the before, the bridge, and the after.
Yeah.
That's taking it a bit literally. But we do have a nicely remixed graph, which is, I like that little project start thing right there. It says, hey, this is where things were. That's kind of nice. And I feel like it's a bit on the wordy side.
It is. And, and this is, John, where I sort of ask you, and this question came up in our Slack community today, which if you're not a part of, you can go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. And, question around like the templates, like in your experience, is it better to have a long version that really gets into like, here's exactly how we did it and all the things, or do people just want like those quick headlines takeaway, especially the sales team who's just like, let me just show what we can do? Like, is there room for both, or is it one or the other?
Yeah, there's definitely room for both. It's a matter of the use case, right? It's like, what is it going to get used for? I mean, in general, most of this stuff is marketing stuff. So yeah, it can never be too short, and it can never be too simple. You're dealing with, room temperature IQ at best. So it's got to be like that. But there is still space for, academic white papers and case studies. Like there are some people that really want to dig into the full details and find out exactly what's going on and how it's working. But the thing you'll find too is that, those are way down at the bottom of the funnel. And this stuff tends to be top of funnel stuff. So yeah, it's got to be super simple. But there is a lot to be said for, like, I was at a company that had a software development tool, and we had a couple of white papers that were 10 or 12 page documents on, how process works and how your development process should come together. And we did those white papers, and those would pull for 7 or 8 years. Those became standard resources that it was like, okay, if this is your first day on the job, go get that white paper and read it. And, now it didn't close any deals right away, but 2 years later, when the company got big enough that they were having problems, they would remember that we were the ones that did that. So, but yeah, I think unfortunately, this is way on the marketing side here. It's got to be big, bold, and the fonts can always be a little bit larger.
But make the logo bigger.
Fair enough.
So it's going to now have to think through the design, but I gave it feedback. I said, this needs to be a single page in one logical section. The chart dangling underneath the narrative is ugly. The headlines are good, but too literal. We don't need to tell people the before, bridge, and after. The text is also very wordy. Think about the ICP and how you'd word this for maximum impact, but word economy. And so now it has to go back and take that feedback and incorporate it. So that's an improvement. That's already better. It's now more of a portrait size rather than a landscape size. So that's something that we might want to think through. But pretty clearly, when you look at just what's in the preview, go, 55% less unattributed traffic. Cool. I have that problem. And so this makes a lot of sense to me narratively if I was an outsider saying, I've got a lot of unattributed web traffic. Who can help me?
Right. And, the portrait versus landscape, that's not something I'm going to like put up a fight over. Like, if portrait works better than landscape, great. Let's do that instead. I don't really care. I just want the case study that's going to tell people, here's what we did, here's how we solve your problem. So if this is a better format, amazing. Let's put all of our existing case studies through it and then create some kind of a process where we can do what you did, Chris, and just sort of put together a narrative and have the system just churn these out one after another.
Mm-hmm. So this is the revision of a case study. So this takes an existing case study and aligns it to the best practices, and then makes some decent design out of it and stuff, which is good. Go ahead.
Before we move on from it, could we take what we just did and ask, again, I might be jumping ahead, so I apologize. I don't want to keep stealing your thunder. But could we take what we just did and ask the system, can you turn what we just did, this process, into a prompt or system instructions that we can reuse? Like, is this where we would do that? Is that even something we could do?
You could, but we've already written a good amount of it. So it's more just some copy pasting.
Okay.
So let's take, in fact, you know what? Let's do that just as good practice. Let's turn off Canvas and say,
okay,
create system instructions for an LLM like Google Gemini to repeat the process of evaluating a case study and then generating a new version using the canvas. The instruction, I was going to say, think through 1, the intent of the prompt, 2, the downstream or second order effects, 3, the appropriate prompt engineering techniques, especially those after 2024-0101, 4, the background knowledge necessary, then create the system instructions. So what we're doing is having to do a bit of reflection and think about, what is this? What is my intent? What am I trying to do? And then using its own background knowledge to build the thing. So let's see what it comes up with, because what we might want to do, I'm going to see if this will work. So while it's thinking, let's see if we can get into this on our client services account. We can. Excellent. Google Opal works. For those who are not familiar, Opal is like a Google-centric, cloud-based, super simple version of N8N. It's N8N without all the extra bells and whistles, and it only works inside the Google ecosystem. So if you're not a Google shop, this is going to be of limited utility. However, we are a Google workspace company, so that's not a terrible thing to have for us. So it says we're going to need our sales playbook. We got our best practices study guide. Yes, good. This all looks good. Let's export this to docs. And we're going to call this system instructions case study revitalization workflow. So this is the giant prompt, which is nice. Let's go into Opal, create a new application. And let's go ahead and add assets. We are going to, let me think about this. We want a user input of an existing case study. Add the existing case study you want to revitalize. So that's our input. Next, we're going to need an asset block. We're going to go from Google Drive. We're going to go to, what was it called? Case study revitalization. There it is. That's our system prompt. We need to add in our 2025 sales playbook. There it is. And we're going to need our case study best practices guide. Add this asset. There it is. Now we should be able to wire in 1, 2, 3.
Does the system instructions include our brand guidelines, or do we need to add that as well?
We need to add that in.
Okay.
There's our case study. And let's add in, we should just make that. New Google Doc. Trust Insights 2025 Trust Insights Brand Style Guidelines Knowledge Block. And we will say this is, you must use the following brand standards. There they are. Good. Save and close. Let's add in our brand standards. My Drive 25 brand standards. And move this block over and draw its little connector. And now we should be able to have it do Gemini 2.5 Pro. Let's think about this. Let's think about order. Execute the system instructions in and move the system instructions block up using these background documents. And read the user case study in. So we've basically created a set of meta prompts here joined together. Now, the outcome of this, we have to think about what we want as the output from this. So we probably want, how do I make my toolbar going? That's annoying. There we go. We probably want this to spit out a nice web page with auto layout. That'd be nice. We might want to also have it spit out something that can go to a Google Doc. And just for fun, let's see if it can spit out something that can go to a Google slide deck.
That would be lovely.
It's going to suck. I've tested this. I was testing this yesterday, and it was just appalling. It was terrible, but it was not bad. I mean, it's better than nothing. All right, so we're going to call this case study revitalization. Now, I do want to caution, Opal it's not even in beta. Like, it's in an alpha. About 50% of the time, it just crashes. So just being aware of that. Let's see. Also, we need to, let's see. Do I have an user input block? All right, let's try this. See what happens here. Case study revitalization. Start. All right, let's take the existing case study we want to revitalize. Let's take our AAA one. Upload from device, desktop, revitalize it.
So I'm curious. I think, Opal is an interesting way to approach it. Why would you do this versus taking the system instructions and background knowledge and not make a gem, for example? So therefore, all you would have to do is say basically the same thing. You take the system instructions, you look at all the things, and then you just say, here's my document, revitalize it.
You absolutely could. Opal offers you a few more bells and whistles, particularly like the Google Doc, the Google Slides, and stuff like that, assuming it runs.
But if you were just looking for like an updated narrative, and again, sort of like what I had said, like where you just want to get the updated content and you can copy and paste into your template, that still takes you a really far way.
Absolutely. So, for example, exactly what you're saying, we can take the existing contents and we can start a gem. And there's our system instructions. And now from our knowledge base, we add our individual files. So we have our brand style guidelines. We have our case study evaluation rubric. We have our case study best practices. We have our master sales playbook. And all of that can get plugged right in as documents. And now it has, we've essentially built exactly the same thing. So
Which
now
I
that
think
gem
it
is
really
available.
depends on your organization. One may be easier to approach than the other, or to your point about Opal, you may have more things that you need to do with it.
Exactly. So if we run this, it should do functionally the same thing. The one thing I do like about Opal is that there's a console where you can see what it's doing, particularly on
Mhm.
multi-step things like doing deep research. That part I really appreciate. But again, you can just hit, show thinking and have it do exactly the same process. So that would be the ways to revitalize an existing case study. A gem,
Mhm.
copy and paste the prompts yourself if you want, or use workflow management of some kind to glue it all together.
And now what do we want to do with the new case study that you recorded the audio for?
We should probably have it try and make something out of that.
Yeah, because it's fine to revitalize the existing, but one of the things I'm wondering is what if it comes back and says, I don't have enough information. I don't think we have that instruction in there. So, I mean, that's sort of like, we'll put that on the back burner for now. We also need a process for creating a net new.
Mm-hmm. Based on the transcript I provided earlier, referencing our sales playbook, our best practices for case studies, our ICPs, render a new document in the canvas that using HTML, CSS, Tailwind, D3JS, CDN.js, conforming to our case study frameworks and formats for the email list hygiene and deliverability case. Let's see if it can take that 2 minutes of foaming at the mouth. And
Mhm.
obviously, this was a toy demo. You would want to invest more than 2 minutes talking about what you did for the customer.
Right.
But let's see what it comes up with in the canvas to see if it can actually put together a moderately compelling case study. One of the things that is difficult to overstate is we spent so much time and effort on a sales playbook, on ICPs, and on all these things that this is making it look easy.
Mhm.
If you don't have those prerequisites, you need them because this will not work without it.
So we did a lot of those on the live stream, which you can get on our So What playlist at trustinsights.ai/YouTube. And if you want help, honestly, just reach out, trustinsights.ai/contact, and John, the man, the myth, the legend, will be happy to, point you in the right direction.
Oh, I love that headline. It's from 6 million problems to 4 million
That is
prospects.
such a marketing headline.
That is, but I love it.
We've got 6 million problems.
Exactly. Man, that looks
Zero.
original list, recover garbage. Yeah, of course, surgical data restoration, DNS MX records, million verifier. Yep. By moving 2 million bad. I mean, that looks fantastic for 2 minutes of foaming at the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like it. It's tight.
So can you use the existing gem/system instructions to create net new? Because we called it revitalization, but it sounds like you can use the exact same to take the transcript and create something new.
I would generate a new prompt for that.
Okay?
I would say, let's now create system instructions for a net new case study. The user will provide a transcript or other background material. You will use the sales playbook, ICPs, case study, best practices, scoring rubric to build a net new case study in the canvas adhering to the brand standards. Convert this into system instructions as we did before.
And for those who can't tell, like, we are legitimately doing the summer makeover of our own stuff, because these are things now post live stream that we're going to start implementing, which is why I'm asking Chris, well, what about this version of it? What about this version? Come tomorrow morning, we'll be using this for ourselves, because this is the kind of thing that you would want to have, especially in a small company or even a large company, to help just make things more efficient. So it's not shortcutting the work that you have to do for the client or your customers. It's just making it more efficient to get the word out there that you did some really cool stuff.
Exactly. So we'll export this to documents to save it. We'll also just copy it. And then let's go back to where were we earlier? Let's see. This was the gem. Was this the artifact? All right. So it did not use the canvas and the gem. That's not a big deal. We can just copy and paste because that's not hard to do. And let's see if the gem did what it was supposed to do. Hey, not bad.
No.
Not bad at all. I like that. The logo's broken, but that's easy enough to fix.
Right.
All right. So let's take this, go into Explore Gems, create a new gem, and we're going to have a new case study generator gem. And we're going to take our system instructions, copy, paste, plop them in, take our files from Drive. We're going to use our system instruction. No, we don't want that one. We want case study evaluation, best practices, sales playbook. Those are all going to go in. And they're going to finish rendering here.
And this includes that scoring rubric that we created?
Sure does.
Amazing.
So we now got our new gem ready to go to build a new case study. Let's give it a test. We will give it the foaming at the mouth. Make a new case study. And while that's
in 45 minutes, 47 minutes, you've created 2 new processes for, the sales and marketing team, which is amazing.
Let's see how we did in here. So it did some rendering, final critique. All right, so let me check to see if it in fact did put anything in Google Drive or it just vaporized, which is entirely possible. Oh, that's ugly.
Yeah.
However,
it did something.
Yes, continue. Go away. Stop it. It crashed Chrome is what it did.
Well, that's, again, it's something.
There we go. There we go. Finally. So it basically turned our thing into a slide deck. Now, this is not great, but
I can see that there's a use case for something like this, especially with, capabilities decks or pitch decks, that kind of a thing. I'm interested to know, I know we kind of scrolled through everything pretty quickly, but with the new versions of the case studies, does it give you what it's scoring itself?
Let's take a look. So it scores the original, it does the rebuild, and it does a reflection. It doesn't apply the scoring critique again. So it only applied the rubric the first time around. So we'd have to change the system instructions.
Right. But, that sounds like it's easy enough to fix.
Exactly.
Like it'd probably just be like adding a line like, okay, and rescore the new version.
Right. So let's try and see how the gem did that we built on its own output. I like the other headline better, from 6 million problems to 4 million prospects. I think that was more clever writing.
I think the other headline is better, but I think that this one aesthetically looks better.
Yep. And so now that gem can be used by anybody because it's on our on the client services account. So any of the folks on the team can use it to create new case studies, particularly if we go back to where we started this live stream and look at this case study and go, gosh, I know we did a voice of the customer project. When did we do that? Oh, that was 2022. I can sit down and narrate it and just hand off the narration to the gem directly or to someone on the team and say, turn this into a new case study.
Yeah. I think one of the things, this is for us to do offline, but Chris, you and I can sit down and go through these one by one and just record what we know about each of them and hand a pile of transcripts to the gem and say, great, go make a bunch of case studies, and then ask our, handy web developer intern to get them up on the website. As we discussed last week with the services pages, I am the web developer intern as well as the CEO.
Exactly. But we've built we've built an engine for doing this. And that really is the point of all of this. Is generative AI isn't just about prompting, it is about building solid process, repeatable process with best practices, which is, as much as people love to crap on best practices, the reality is I think of it as like, here's the bar of minimum competence. And we know because we're a small startup and some of these case studies are like 3 years old now. We were below the bar of minimum competence. So now we can bring ourselves up to the bar of minimum competence.
Well, and like I said at the top of the episode, I mean, as the person who had been creating a lot of the case studies, it's not my core function, but it had to get done. And so I'm excited to learn better best practices of what should actually be in there versus what I think should be in there. And I think that that's a lot of what we're learning through a lot of these processes, like creating the ICP. It takes our personal opinions out of it. Therefore, it's more suited for what the customer wants and not just what we think they want.
Exactly. So that's the summer makeover on case studies. We now have 2 apps that we can use anytime we want to refresh an existing case study or to make a brand new one.
I'm pretty gosh darn excited about that, legitimately.
John, any final parting words?
No, I love it. This is just the thing you want, because now it's just like you said, Katie, it's totally that case study where some prospect comes in and is like, hey, have you ever done? And you're like, oh, I know we did that sometime on something. And to be able to just make a neat little PDF that they can send around to their team, like that's huge. That makes you look like a much bigger company.
I mean, I feel like, John, that's going to be part of our new process is when a new prospect comes in, what are they asking for? And do we have a case study? If not, can we go ahead and just put that up really quickly? Someone's asking, can we share the Slack link again? Our free Slack group, trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, totally free. I suggest you join, personally.
There's no downside to being there.
There's no downsides. No.
Exactly. And there's plenty of upside, including the Friday questions of the day. That's going to do it for this episode, folks. We will talk to you all on the next one. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.